Welcome, Confidenciales. Thank you for your support and for following us. This is breaking news from Venezuela. Exclusive information that comes to us from circles close to the White House and is absolutely reliable. Get ready because this is good news. We are going to tell you about the plan by Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, the timetable he has ordered Delcy Rodriguez to follow to achieve freedom and democracy in Venezuela. The months, the dates, even when the first democratic elections in Venezuela in 26 years will be held. And pay attention. The plan was developed by Marco Rubio, but María Corina Machado herself also collaborated on it. This exclusive will give hope to the 9 million exiled Venezuelans who will be able to make plans, I hope, to return to their homeland as soon as this timetable is implemented. That's why María Corina Machado said a few days ago that she did not rule out meeting with Delcy Rodriguez. She would do it in Washington soon to make it clear who is in charge. We'll tell you everything, dates, months in a minute. Gentlemen, the timetable for Venezuela's freedom is already underway. That's why Laura Dogul, Washington's envoy to monitor Delcy Rodriguez, is firmly forcing the Chavistas to comply. Everything is going too slowly. We agree. Starting with the amnesty. Among other things, because the National Assembly is still Chavista. And there's Diosdado Cabello, who is the biggest problem, and the United States has made a decision. We mentioned it in previous programs. They want a dramatic move. They want to be taken more seriously, like they were after Maduro was removed so quickly and effectively. That dramatic move would be to eliminate Diosdado Cabello soon, very soon, so that the rest of the military commanders follow Marco Rubio's orders. But the schedule is set. Pay attention to the dates, December 2026. From today until December of 2026, that is 9 months, the Chavista commanders, all the Chavista commanders in the armed forces or in the Bolivarian National Guard must be out of their positions. Then we'll see who ends up in exile, who ends up in prison in the new Venezuelan democracy. There will be trials for torture and abuse. All of that will be dealt with later. But the first decided plan is that it's 9 months, the deadline to get rid of the high command of the Venezuelan army or the National Guard, who are still obeying Chavismo. In the intelligence service, movements have already begun. There are Central Intelligence Agency agents controlling the intelligence service. That's why Alex Saab or Raul Gorin were arrested. There's much more to do. We have to get rid of the National Assembly itself, the Chavista Attorney General's office, and the Chavista National Electoral Council. It's all a web of Chavista officials who have betrayed their country, their citizens, and who collaborate with the narco state. Therefore, in 10 months, a complete purge in the security forces and intelligence in Venezuela. The military commanders must obey Marco Rubio's orders. Why 10 months, they ask me. Why so much time? I have also asked that question to the source. They tell me that as of today, there are still 700,000 armed Chavista militiamen in the country. Many are handing in their weapons, and possibly after that dramatic move with Diosdado Cabello, many more will hand them in. But that task of disarming the Chavistas who have taken over the neighborhood, the town, the streets. In some places in Venezuela, the Central Intelligence Agency is carrying it out with the Federal Bureau of Investigation in a very calm, quiet, but effective way. That's why that time is needed. And the question that many of you ask us journalists, When will Maria Corina Machado return to Caracas? When will she leave her forced exile in Washington? Well, according to our information, when those 10 months are over, that is next December, when the armed forces, the National Guard, and the intelligence service are already led by democratic and free Venezuelan military officers. Therefore, Maria Corina Machado, who wanted to return to her country much earlier, will return in December 2026 when the United States can ensure that her life is not in danger. There has also been a lot of speculation these days about democratic elections. They even conduct polls asking Venezuelans who they would vote for, Delcy Rodriguez or Maria Corina Machado. It's absurd to think that Delcy Rodriguez is going to run in those elections. According to our information, Delcy Rodriguez will resign from her position when the United States orders her to. That would be when democratic elections are called. I'll give you an approximate date in a few minutes. They're fed up with her. They're tired of her double dealing. They accept up to a certain point that the assembly lies, that it says it still governs the country, that it delays the amnesty law, but they don't accept that double dealing that prevents democracy from moving forward. Therefore, there is no choice. Delcy Rodriguez will not be allowed to run in the first democratic elections in Venezuela, but that won't prevent there from being a Chavista party candidate in those elections. When would they be? Gentlemen, the information we have is that in the spring of 2027, the first free elections in Venezuela in 26 years will be held. Spring of 2027. And make no mistake, Maria Corina Machado will be the main candidate and will almost certainly win those elections by a landslide. They also tell us that Edmundo Gonzalez would not run in those elections as the main candidate. He would leave that position to Maria Corina Machado, but he would still hold a high representative office in the country, maybe president of the National Assembly. Friends, as I said, Marco Rubio developed this plan, this schedule, with the help of Maria Corina Machado. And Delcy Rodriguez knows this schedule perfectly well and has no choice but to comply with it. Everything we're telling you will be supervised from the United States. Maria Corina hasn't been cornered. She's been protected, and she won't return to the country until those 700,000 people who still have weapons hand them over, and until the high-ranking positions in the Army and the National Guard are held by military officers who have been suffering torture and pain in prison. It's true, Chavismo still remains and it's divided. On one hand, there are those who follow orders, the Rodriguez siblings, Delcy and Jorge, and on the other hand, those who have gone rogue, like Diosdado and Vladimir Padrino, although Padrino isn't a concern for the United States. Vladimir Padrino, as we already told you, has requested exile in Spain. Former President Rodriguez Zapatero is acting as an intermediary for this. And he wants to come here with the excuse of treating his serious illness, which seems to be terminal cancer. And by the way, the Chavistas in Venezuela are very worried about the possible visit of Donald Trump to Caracas in a few weeks or months. Why? Because they know that Venezuelans will take to the streets to applaud him, to thank him, and they can't stand that image. That's why in recent days they've been carrying out express kidnappings, making more threats than ever, and once again riding around with motorcycles and weapons in some areas of Venezuela, even in the capital, to try to keep fear alive. It's getting harder and harder in a Venezuela that knows it's very free and knows what its path to freedom is. They can't stop all of Venezuela from taking to the streets to applaud Donald Trump if he arrives. We will tell you more details about this schedule in the coming days. Focus on what's important. From now until December, all the high-ranking military officers will be out and in their place, democratic military officers. In December, when this happens, María Corina Machado will arrive in Caracas and there will be free elections in the spring of 2027. Friends, this is unstoppable. The first democratic elections for Venezuela in almost 30 years are already here, and we will witness them together. We investigate.
Castillon Confidential by Albert Castillon.